So the previous video had some ramblings and finally corrected for the drawing template sheet format issue is having with the part numbers not coming over correctly. I have one more thing to do and we'll run back through the process. So I've changed the name over to the simple A landscape. And again, that process would be to go into the options, over to document properties, go to the drawing sheets, make sure that the use custom multi-sheet custom properties source, use custom property values is unchecked. Once that's in place, save your sheet format. And I don't know that it has to be in the drawing templates, but the best practice is just to go ahead and save the drawing template after the sheet format. Make sure everything's up to date and has the same information. Alright, so the last thing we might want to do is edit the sheet format and put in a logo. And the logo, in this case, we will pick, well, let's see if I can minimize that. We'll just fly this in. Alright, so one of the things with the logo is that it will accumulate whatever size and whatever resolution you bring into the sheet. So this logo is 19 kilobytes, this one is 247. If I have 20 sheets, that's 20 times 20. If it was a 1 meg logo, I would have very nice resolution. Seeing how we're putting it in kind of the bottom corner there, you really wouldn't be able to notice the resolution for the dots per inch that the printer's capable of. So that being the case, then you would not really be gaining anything, and your 20-page drawing package would all of a sudden be at least 20 meg. All right, so every sheet is going to contain that logo. So if we insert a picture, and then I navigate back over to that folder, and find the picture and open, see what size it is. Alright, so we'll get it into position. When you see this locator, that will help you rotate and scale to an existing line or to existing geometry. Otherwise, we're just going to grab the corners and make it roughly fit into the space. Okay, so now that's part of my sheet format. We go ahead and hit OK, and I go back to editing the sheet. Same process that we did before. File, save as. Well, we'll save the sheet format so it's embedded, and then File, save as, drawing template. And in this case, I believe the drawing template is referencing the sheet format, so all I would really have to do is rebuild. If I don't want to rebuild every time, then saving it back to the drawing template is a safe bet. Alright, so we'll double check it one more time. This is an evolving process of check, recheck, verify that it's working the way that you want to, and then forget about it for a year until you have to go through and dust off those brain cells and get it working again. So going back into the drawings, we have one more, or into our projects, we do have one more thing we need to discuss on the existing drawing, is that sheet format was not updated or was not correct. So when we create this next part, we'll take it into our drawing package, and then we'll have to make sure that the formats are staying correct. Alright, so looking at this part, we have a cylinder with a notch through it. This 16 millimeter is kind of a strange way of generating our geometry. So 8 millimeters by 16 millimeters wide, and 9 millimeters back on the edge, 60 millimeters high. So let's fly that out of the way. This is going to be a new part metric. I want this in the top plane. Generate our geometry. Oh, and since this is the new install of 2018 on my workstation, I need to update my view background. So we have the nice gradient, which, yeah, it's okay. Features, extrude boss base, and this is going to be 60 millimeters tall. And from the front plane, we'll open up the sketch. Obviously my options aren't set to go normal 2 as well. So open profile going from corner to corner, and that grabbed the midpoint. So that little bit of flash that showed midpoint was my only indicator. And we have an angle of 30 degrees with a from center of 12. So if I position this correctly, I can go between the points without drawing the center line. 30 millimeters off of the top face, and then coincident back to the point. So do I need to make that fully defined? For an open profile, let's find out. So extending past shouldn't be a problem, but what if it were a little too short? Features, extrude, cut extrude, and this is going to be a through all, and tells me that it can't because it has to extend past the body limits. Well, having an underdefined sketch is kind of a red flag anyway, so taking that extra step, making it coincident, then if even the line extending past the geometry were to grow, grow the diameter, we wouldn't end up with that error. Making that coincident would follow it wherever it goes. Extrude cut, through all both, and we have our shape. Opening up the sketch then, and going normal 2. The bottom corner, I'm going to put a point at that intersection, and it's following, so we'll go with the horizontal to the origin to get it defined. And it shows this point as the bottom of the 16 millimeter rectangle. Alright, so going into position, I'll create a rectangle, set it to the midpoint, and then this is 16 millimeters wide. Midpoint takes care of the other geometry. And because of the weird angle, I don't know that I want to make that a square. Alright, so if I go to do the cut extrude, this is going to be perpendicular to this face and go straight through the part. That is not the desired result. So one of the things I can do is turn on the temporary axes, and when we go into the extrude cut, this will be a through all. It shows me the preview, and then the direction of the cut can follow that temporary axis. Alright, it finds it through the geometry, retains the angle, which is fine as long as it makes it all the way through. We go ahead and accept. And then the last piece of geometry is diameter of 7, 20 millimeters deep. I mentioned the S key, and the S key has the hole wizard on it. So we want, and whatever I changed last time to update, we're going to reset. All drill sizes, all ANSI metric. We want to go to drill sizes, and then somewhere down this list we're going to find a 7 millimeter. And in condition will be blind 20 millimeters. So for a drill point, that'll make it to the shoulder of the drill. We go into the position, set the position. That can be horizontal. Let's go normal 2, Control 8. And temporary axis is still on, so I've turned that off. So we'll set horizontal, and then that distance was 9 millimeters off of the edge. For a datum reference, that's not really what I would want to pick from. It may be good to for the design, but when we get into the drawing and the detail, I would want to go off of the center of the part. We can turn the temporary axes back off. So that one goes, and thought it goes. View temporary axis. And actually I thought those were going to be the, well, let's do a rebuild. Okay, Control B rebuilds. Axis is an axis feature, and the temporary axes just needed to update the geometry. So we'll save, and this is going to go into our working folder for Chapter 3. Keep the name consistent, and that was 30. Save. Okay, so custom properties is probably, well, might be pointed to the right place. Alright, so if it's pointed to the right place, then it will find my custom properties, and we're going to give this its name. I kind of updated, in the process of going through the templates, I updated my naming convention, so 330. And part name is cylinder. We're going to kind of stay closer to the description than really a part name. Revision 1. Apply. If I set the material, let's go with an A36. Something different. Finish will be raw. And units are set to grams because we're in metric. And the issue here will be that once I go into the to the drawing, if the drawing is set or we haven't done dual dimensioning, that will be more of a cross-check that we're not in inch, pounds, and seconds, or that we're in millimeters, grams, and seconds. Okay, so that gets closed. And the process would be all along, if we were entering those in, I wouldn't have to go back and do it later to update our drawing sheet. So we'll go back in, open. My chapter 4 is to create these values, and we have sheet 1, sheet 2. Double check the properties, because now I'm going to be checking it everywhere. So that is unchecked on this this sheet format. I decide I want to go back to my other format. We go into the properties, pick up the simple A landscape, apply the changes. Yes, it can delete the notes, and then that's going to update to my current sheet format. So if I had made a change to the format and added well, we already have drawn by, modeled, maybe the modeled by, added something additional to this sheet format, I would have to go through each sheet and go through this process to bring it up to date to the current items. And then apply changes, yes. And now we have the current format. Alright, so let's go ahead and add and see what it generates. Since it sees this as the previous, it'll bring that in. And one more check. Now we have same as sheet specified. So apparently it was in the drawing template, because it doesn't appear to be picking it up from the sheet format. So let's check sheet 2. Yeah, that one was okay. So we're going to do a Control B. There was no information entered for either of those parts. So model view, properties, or sorry, browse, 330, got properties on the brain all of a sudden. Create multiple views, and add. Okay, so now Control B updates my information, and with the material, that would be something that I might want to change in the format to better position that in relation to the logo so that it doesn't overrun. Alright, this didn't pick up any of the center marks. So we'll go center mark for all holes. And not really finding anything in the preview, so that being the case, well, it did find one. I'm going to go ahead and apply, picking up the other item. Center line would be between 2. And do those, are those showing up? Alright, so center. So let's see, I got the face. Let's double check. Alright, so I'm still in center line, so that's not going to let me select. I was asking for selection. We'll go over change, and apparently in making all those adjustments, we carried over the new sheet format into the old sheet format for the layers, so I'm going to have some duplicates. If I really wanted to correct for those, whichever one's going to be the current, I'd go back into layer properties and delete those out. Alright, so applying a couple of dimensions, we have the radius, we have the height, we have the angle, and before I get any further into it, I'll make sure that I'm in my dim layer. Oh, and my center didn't stay, so let's go over to other. And those aren't updating correctly, so how about a rebuild? So it's not finding one of them. So either I turned off the colors in my drawing, which is very possible, or I am not picking. No, those are both set to center. I would expect at least to go over to the correct value. So we're in dim. Let's see if it adds the next one. Okay, so size, center. No, something else to go back and check on the sheet format. Maybe because I brought it over from the edge. No. Okay. And then one last view layout. Let's go with the auxiliary view aligned to that edge. Like we did before, we're going to need to break the alignment to fit it in a little bit better. So alignment, break alignment, and set view B. And then that will let me set so that wasn't quite it. Or pick up the geometry. Well, because of the isometric. Let's see, it did pick up that whole edge. That's interesting. So let's go to the endpoint. Alright, so along that edge, but then probably more useful is going to be what it actually measures on the linear, because we're not going to make it across that angle. So if that's there, it's there for reference. And we'll put the parentheses around it. All right, and then for the whole location, whole call out, 7 with a depth of 20. All right, sizing's a little bit on the large side, so maybe half. We'll go 3/4. Apply changes. And since that didn't update, that tells me that my parent view is probably still at the use custom sheet scale. All right, everything but the isometric. So go back over to sheet scale. That looks a little more more usable. And we'll go to the next part. Alright, so let's fly this in, and we'll go over to 331. And it is in metric as well. Alright, so screen background, no, need to go to scenes, basic scenes. Going to find the plain white, set as the default. That's a little closer to what I'm used to. And we'll start in on our sketch. So front plane. So let's fly that drawing back in. Alright, so if this is half of a part or a clamshell, then we may end up creating both pieces as bodies. If not, it'll be simpler to create the circle, create the polygon, split it, and select the region. So the dimension here was 100 across the diameter, so we'll stay with the 100. Go ahead and split to the quadrants. Pick up our hexagon. Hexagon across the flats was 35 millimeters, so we can either go from flat to flat or the inscribed circle. And as far as orientation, this is able to rotate, so one of these needs to be vertical. The extrusion then is extrude. We'll stay mid-plane. Depth is 90 millimeters, and the contour and region will be the interior of the top half of the clamshell. Go into the right plane, and for that matter, go front plane. Now we're given 25 millimeters off of each end, so let's go ahead into the sketch. Another one, options, drawings. Yep, I'm going to have to do these eventually, so mark and auto rotate. Go into the rectangle. We're going to look for coincident. We'll select midpoint. Control select the edge. There's my silhouette edge. And make midpoint. So anytime you have that cylinder, depending on the relation, you may get coincident. You may get it may reference it as a silhouette edge. And that's 25 millimeters off, so Control Z a couple times to clear it. 25 millimeters by 20 millimeters deep. Extrude cut. Through all, make sure it's through all both, or otherwise we'll only get half of it. Alright, so to move this along, I'm going to go ahead and generate the rest of the drawings, and then we'll come back and put the drawing sheet together. Okay, so material on this one, now we'll just go down the list. Aluminum, it should show up in the material. Let's give this a black anno, and units are still set to grams, even though when we take it into the to the drawing, again we're going to have to pay attention to those units of, are we detailing in metric or are we detailing in inch? Okay, so that one can close. We'll go ahead and open up the space. Flying in the drawing for our next part, 331 goes over to, or jump, 332. This one's always an interesting part because of the 3/4 cutout. The holes are assumed through, would have a notch out. If we could drill the cylindrical hole, that would be pretty cool, but I haven't figured out a way to do that yet. I'm going to go with the contour and region again. New part, and we're in metric. So want it to look like the picture, we'll go into the right plane, pick up our sketching, draw a couple of circles, and with the shading on, we're getting that kind of doubly nested gray, or light gray, darker, darker, and shaded sketch contours may be showing up under one of the others, but I would like to have it inside of the sketching command manager. So if I drag it out to the command manager, then I can turn it on and off as needed. Alright, so working from the inside out, because I'm not quite sure of scale, we'll go 16, 22, and it auto-scaled correctly anyway, so. And then diameter of 40. And I do want that to be the outside. Alright, so one cut is going to be vertical. One cut off to the side. I guess I could have put that one all the way through. That gives me my basic cutout shapes for the geometry. Alright, so if we generate this, we'll go into the features, extrude, and the selected contour will be outside and inside. And that's going to generate a 20mm depth, and we'll call that good. I share the sketch, extrude boss base, then we can go look for the region, and since it's starting on this plane, I can go the full length of 60mm. It's going to merge the result, and so we go into the selected contour. I got part of it. Alright, so if that's the case on the selection, I'm better off getting the two contours rather than going after the region. Okay, so one part. The outside shouldn't be too bad, but we'll try the blind in condition on that one. So let's go with the extrude cut. And see if we can pick up the surface or face. So that direction, reverse the direction. The contour and region will be, we're going to have to pick each one individually, so that shouldn't be too bad. Except I'm getting button happy. Alright, so let's see what that looks like. Alright, so that'll cut out pretty much the interior. And it's going to be offset from surface because I want to work from this surface back 20mm. And then we'll look for the preview. Alright, so that makes the notch cut. And then, oh yeah, one more. Extrude cut. And let's go for the, see if it'll select it as a contour. Nope. Finding everything, that's an interesting result. Don't know that I expected that, so we just need those two. Oh, and we're going to flip the direction, need to offset to the from to the face, and then this can go to through all. Alright, so got a little too much in that selection, or no, it went over to thin feature. So nope, don't want a thin feature. I just need the bottom section, and that should make the cut. And oh, do have one more on top of that, so sketch. Nope, didn't need to edit the sketch, needed to make another cut extrude. Alright, so the single lines generated my thin features, so we're going to go back to the regions. And this will be an up to surface so that we can terminate it at that edge. Alright. So, again, I got good geometry, tried the contour and region. As far as the hole locations, we're going to go with the hole wizard, so S key, hole wizard. Go normal 2. This is a through hole. We have 5 millimeters in 2 places. Through all. Positions. Set the dimensions is 6 millimeters from the outside. And 10 millimeters, or we set it to the midpoint if our design intent that it will always be centered. Okay, so there's one. Go back in. S key, hole wizard, same settings. Everything was retained. Pick up our position. So if I go back and I show that sketch, and it's able to project, I should be able to make long leg, short leg, should be able to make that vertical. And then we still have to give it the 6 millimeters off of the face. But that makes it so that if there's a dimension change, it'll probably happen to both of them. And changing the one will change the other. So hide, 7, and save. Flying in for the next part, 332. Alright, so not specifically called out for a depth, so assume that that one goes through. Like the contours and regions on this one as well. We have all of the concentric circles. We can take advantage of those items. So file new. This one is metric as well. We'll go back to the right plane. So one circle to the inside, one circle to the outside, one circle, and line splitting them all. That should leave us with just the slot to contend with. Outside diameter is 40. Next diameter in is 32. And the final diameter is 20. Let's go ahead and extrude. And this is going to be a blind in condition to a depth of 100. Alright, so it still jumps into the thin feature, selecting that single line. So let's just clear selections, make sure it's all cleared. Everything's going to participate, so I'll grab the 3 regions. And blind in condition. Going to add the boss extrude for the outside. Let's see, this is counting back 25, 35. So offset from surface 25 plus 35. Surface selection is here. And if we reverse, oh, and I still have to select. So it should be just this outside ring. Well, let's try the reverse offset again. Oh, that was to the end of the slot. Oh, 80 back. Alright, so we can do that as still an offset surface. Reverse the offset, go back 80. Sketch again. We're going to do an extrude cut this time. We'll pick the whole thing up, put it on the end surface. Direction is okay. Depth we're given as 8 millimeters. And then the selected contour will be this internal section. Alright, open up the sketch on the top face. Go into the slot. We should be endpoint to endpoint. So we have a width of 10. And from the end 25 millimeters. And overall of 35. Depth is 3 millimeters. Okay, and that should save. Alright, so 33, we'll go over to 34. This one kind of lends itself to a revolve, and since we don't get to do too many revolves, we'll go ahead and put it in place. Creating it at that, that orientation, I'll go with part metric. We'll go with the, it shouldn't matter, front plane would be alright, top plane would be okay too. Whenever we're doing the revolve, center line, horizontal, infinite length, axis becomes our axis of revolution. So an up and over, down, and then the question is, do I include the chamfer or leave the chamfer as a separate feature? We'll go ahead and include it. Oh, and then I do want to close this off, otherwise it's going to ask me to. So dimension. Overall, we have a diameter of 40 millimeters, and the outside, .28. So it still picked up the center line. Distance is 60. So between my two verticals, we went to 60. The angle 5 millimeters by 40, 45. So whichever side we want to pull off of. And the overall length of 80. Okay, gives me my shape, features, revolve. Go back into the front plane. We're going to set up for the cut, and this is listed as 19 millimeters off of, well, assuming the base. We're going to see what it looks like. Find the silhouette edge. 19 millimeters. Looks pretty good, and considering how much it would chop if it was coming off the bottom of the outside circle, it's probably a good guess. So silhouette edge and the line collinear, features, extrude cut through all both. Circle on top. Oh, there was a second step there I missed. Alright, so we go back in. Alright, so let's figure this out. 60 was back to the step, but then it continues a little bit further. So it was actually 50. So I don't need to make another section of the revolve, I just need to update my geometry. Alright, so the cut being 60, the revolve being 50. Alright, so that being the case then, the cut extrude, we still want to be collinear, but I need to take the coincidence off so that I can stretch that out 10 more millimeters. Okay, so that looks better. And then 12 millimeters through. Yeah, let's stay with the whole wizard. Simple, metric, drill size. Through all, position, and I guess I got button happy there. Keep in mind that you can edit the location just by editing the sketch without getting back into the geometry. We'll say that that is okay as a correcting or adding dimensions to the geometry. Go minimal on the profile. The second sketch has that profile geometry, and editing it can create additional problems. So first sketch okay, second sketch not so okay. Alright, so 34. Save. Okay, so that jumps over. We need to get back up to 35. 35 has the half angle. This kind of lends itself to being the origin being on this corner, so that we can cut the angle away. All right, so a lot of these will be, that's just a good way to do it. So there'll be repeats of the previous semester's videos. Front plane, sketch, circle, line, line. All right, so if I have too much, we'll always be able to go back and correct for it. All right, so the reference, okay, so that was what we needed. We didn't have so much have a diameter as we had a reference. So 47 millimeters, 15 millimeters from center line. And maybe I'll go ahead and switch that to construction geometry or center line, so that we can extrude it back. And features, extrude. Items that we're interested in are going to be the two regions. And this is going to go a total of 70 millimeters. So front plane, go back into the right plane. So I got the rotation. Not necessary to change the orientation to match. If it was the best going into the drawing, or it made more sense going into the assembly to have it rotated, we always have that option by going right click on the sketch 1, edit sketch plane, and we're going to go from front to right. Right? As long as this comes across correctly, basically does the rotation, then we'll stay with it. All right, so front plane, set up our angle, watch out for that midpoint. What do we have? Oh, and then I think I foreshortened it a little bit. I sure did. All right, so 15 millimeters back from the edge, and 20 from the top. And then this is going to be an extruded cut. Change the direction. Interesting that it wants to go that way. All right, so through all, and jumps to through all both, which I did not want. So how does it determine that position? Interesting. Okay, didn't know it would do that. So what about a flip side to cut? Because that should remove the rest of the material, but we're not exactly changing direction. Okay, so let's get out of that and go ahead and complete the triangle. And I just had that realization that I put the center at the wrong line. All right, so we'll try the extruded cut again. Now I can flip the direction, go up to next or through all, complete the geometry. All right, so center point is here. I noticed is that the radius of 47 is off of that outside corner. So we'll go back into the sketch. I'm looking for my coincidence, which allows everything to go to blue. Let's see, so we had the 15. So there's the other coincidence. Let's see if that'll allow it to move. All right, so let's get this one in position. A coincident. And that one has a midpoint, still didn't give it to me. The other quadrant. So that one got freed up. Vertical should be okay. Those points should be okay. Horizontal. Horizontal to the end point. Nope. horizontal to the next. Alright, so that frees that one up. And I should have just deleted it and got on with it. Yep, so that's still holding on to the... Alright, so that one just needs to... I fought it enough. That one just needs to jump out. So that doesn't exactly put it on the right plane. So let's double check that coincidence again. Alright, so making that more complicated than it's worth. That goes back to being a construction line. And then my 47, yeah, okay, radius of 47 came off of the edge. Alright, so all of that to change the circle. I probably would have been better off just going ahead and deleting the sketch and starting it over. Alright, so let's see if that generates an error or rebuilds correctly. Alright, so I picked my strategy and I had to kind of stay with it until I unpainted myself out of that corner. So, save. And 35. Alright, going over to 36. This one has the interesting geometry for the shape. Again, this kind of notch out is assumed to go through. So we're going to kind of have to figure out what's going on here with the lines. Again, it lends itself to the contours and regions to do that sketch. So we're in metric, file, new part. We'll go with the right plane. Open up the sketch. Go ahead and generate a couple of circles. Dimension to the outside is 40. Oh, and I went ahead and picked inch, pounds, and seconds anyway, so millimeters, grams, and seconds. So why don't we undo that just a little bit, get rid of that dimension so that when I switch back over, see if the auto scale will catch up to it. So that's not too bad. 40 millimeters on the outside. What do we have? 7 millimeters. So if I go circle to circle, that will give me a wall thickness, 7 millimeters. We have a line at 12 millimeters. And then we have another line up a little ways from that. So we're going to go from the circle to the line so that I can use the leaders and come back to a minimum. That worked out pretty good. So 12 millimeters. And then the next line is 8 millimeters up from that. Okay. So let's go ahead and extrude this out. We're going to go with the outside, and our distance is still 100. Selected contours. Let's just go with the two circles as the easier selection. I'm going to reverse this one since this sketch is going to kind of make the cuts going back, or create the geometry going back. And again, there's no depth call out other than the 35 millimeters, so this is assumed to go all the way through. So sharing the sketch, highlight. We're going to go with the extrude boss base. Let's see, that's going to, well, let's go with the two regions. And actually, let's go back into the definition of this and see if I can pick up that region, because that goes all the way through. So I included it, but it doesn't look like it really did anything adding to the geometry with that extra. Okay, so that being the case, we'll extrude that all the way all the way through. So that geometry reverse through all. And then the next geometry will be the interior shape that we have to offset. So sharing, extrude boss base, pick up the region it's from. We're going to offset it 35 millimeters. Check the direction as we go. Reverse the offset, reverse the direction, give it a through all so it terminates, and let it merge the result. Alright, so on the front plane, go into the sketch, and we're 40 millimeters back and 15 millimeters up. So from angle to angle, find our silhouette edge on the base, 15 millimeters, 40 millimeters. And then features, extrude cut, through all both. Alright, generates the shape. So item 36. And then we'll come over to 37. So 37 has the notation on this this triangle that based on the depth of the cut, it will either terminate at this face. There is no call out telling you how deep it goes, so it either terminates at this face or it goes all the way through. Either way, the triangular shape really needs to be necessary because that's going to have to be a wire EDM, and if it's a blind, then it's going to have to be a sinker EDM to generate that shape. So we really need to think about what the function of that triangle is, and if it's going to be worthwhile to include in the manufacturing process, or can we come up with a better clearance or better way of alignment. Okay, so this part is symmetrical. It is in metric. And we'll go with the right plane. Anytime I see symmetry, go into the center line, infinite length vertical. We'll get out and go into the select. I'm going to use the continuous arc, so we'll come back into our arc, into a line, up, over, a little bit of a step, up and over. Okay, so we'll get some dimensions on that. Between centers is 60, so that'll be our starting point. The radius, we have a height of 25, so let's stay with that. Alright, because this is at that kickback angle too, it's we're going to assume that the triangle and the circle are projected off of the front face, or off the perpendicular face. Let's see, for the interior step then, we have 24 up here, so we'll start crossing these dimensions off our list. 6 millimeters on the step, so escape out of the angle. Oh, got an extra number in there. 6, and the height of 10. And our overall height of 70. Okay, we'll go ahead and mirror. So let's just do the right to left window pick, mirror entities. And then, do I want to include the circle in the sketch? We've been leaning towards the hole wizard, so yeah, I'm going to stay with the hole wizard. Alright, so extrude boss base. Overall is 90 millimeters. I'll set that depth. Going into the front plane then, we'll generate the two cuts. Well, at least the one cut. Now let's go ahead and generate the two cuts. Alright, so from the bottom edge, up at the angle till it terminates. And then the first thing that jumps out at me is I am trying to mix an open profile and a closed profile, which is not going to be able to complete. It's going to have an error. So 32 millimeters with a depth of 15. Alright, so choice is to close off this geometry, or we'll switch that to construction geometry, and I will connect these to make my pencil goes down, up, over, back, a continuous open profile that can cut through both directions. Okay, so need to keep selected bodies. Alright, so I split. We're going to flip the side to cut, make sure that it's the exterior, and then I won't have to worry about those bodies. Alright, so I realize at this point that it would have been a good time to go ahead with the circle through, or a hole wizard. So I can do a rollback. If we grip that bottom rollback bar and go normal 2, pick up the hole wizard. That's going to be a dimension of 20. Find our value, pick our position, and we're going to make one vertical to the origin, and the other will have a dimension of 25. Okay, and then we'll double check, make sure that I told it on the type that it's through all, and go ahead and accept. Alright, so when I roll forward, that's going to create the angle. Alright, so what to do? Well, let's go ahead and put in the other hole wizard, and that is a diameter of 12. Alright, so select the diameter. Since it asked me for the 3D sketch, I did not pre-select, so first click is going to pick the face, second click is going to set the geometry. Have a distance of 12 millimeters, and this is going to be horizontal to the origin. And we'll just double check again that it's through all. Alright. So getting into the triangular shape. If I generated it at the same time that I did the hole, we'd have 12, and the height is linear at 15. So, well, let's see what that does. So again, with the rollback, we'll go before the cut extrude, open up the sketch, and again, the assumption would be that this is a through all. And one of the things we would be looking for then, I'm going to go ahead and put a center line there and switch it over to construction since it was object geometry, and make it a little easier to go coincident to the origin. We had a width of 12, height of 15, and from position 45. Features, extrude, cut, and we'll tell it to go all the way through. Alright, so when we roll forward, we'll see the problem as it makes the notch through the geometry. And let me double check. Oh, that was 15 from the. I thought that looked a little deep, so we do need to check the cut extrude here. Alright, so instead of the 15 from the top, it's 15 from the ledge. And that should reduce the kind of dovetail looking shape, but again, we have to decide what we're going to do with that, if this face is going to lower or it actually makes the cut all the way through. So since that is a concern, I'm going to go ahead and leave it. It calls for, fillets and rounds. But really the only place I see a fillet or a round is kind of up in this corner, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put one there. Maybe over the top. Okay, well, then we'll guess. So it's not called out in the detail. And 3 millimeters. Yeah, not sure about that one. We'll go ahead and save it and know that that one has issues, that when it makes it over to the assembly, we're going to look at its functionality and make some more decisions about that geometry. Alright, 38 into the kind of a comb. So pretty much up over, we'll kind of make this this shape and then make the cuts. Well, it'll come. Just in the wrong spot. Alright, so also metric, file new, part metric, front plane. Doesn't really matter. So over, corner, up, over. Back down and around. We'll get some dimensions on this. Up. Alright, so height of 35. Overall height of 70. Let's see, our thickness is either 6 or 8. Now we'll go with 8, see what it looks like. Yep, 8. So zoom up on the file. Oops, too far. Still too far. Alright, so 8, 8, and should be okay on the geometry. Alright, so collinear. Since these are going to, design intent say they're always going to be equal, I'm going to set them equal. Overall distance is 40. And position for the groove, that's showing back at 21 millimeters off of this front edge. Okay, that gets extruded. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. It may not be a great advantage to the having a pattern here, so at least if I can mirror, well, it still doesn't really matter if I go mid-plane or off of one side. So 100 millimeters. Open up a sketch on the face. I'm going to generate the rectangles. All right, so the groove is, let's see, there are 20 between each. Full radius, 12 millimeters, 4 places. So those can be equal. I think yeah. Alright, so 20 millimeters between. Let's go with that sketch point. More so just because we don't get to use points too much. And one of the places we use them is rather than generating a center line or a bunch of center lines, go ahead with the one. And we'll go ahead and mirror. And then we had 20 millimeters between and 20 millimeters between. Top edge and the end point of the line. Missed something there, so reselect. Midpoint. Depth in is 14. I probably could have included the arcs. And one is collinear. Alright, and well, kind of the issue with the mirror and mirroring center lines is it makes it a little more difficult on the selection. We'd probably have to put them back over to object lines anyway, so if we want to go back into the mirror though, I have the two arcs now. Have the center line, we'll go ahead with the mirror. Extrude cut, through all or up to next. We haven't been using up to next very much, so that gives us our geometry. Top sketch then. Let's go with a select midpoint. We'll center it on the midpoints. Depth is 10 millimeters and 60 millimeters wide. And then that feature goes all the way, up through that first rib. So might as well just say through all. All right, setting our radiuses then. Fillets and round, radius of 5. So 1, 3, and 4. Don't see any other ones in that mix, so that goes over to fillet. 5 millimeters. And we'll go ahead and accept. Save. Save. Alright, I believe 339 and 340 both lend themselves to sheet metal. The description says consider a shell, consider it, and then don't do it. This really has a better chance of, for making a bracket, even at, what did we end up with for the thickness? 5 millimeter thickness. If we're going to manufacture this part and we have to kind of work on the bends, I think we have a better chance of bending this part than we do machining it. So we'll operate under that assumption and discard it later if it doesn't play out. Alright, so that being the case, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video and pick up with sheet metal on the next go around.